Hi everyone, so we'll just wait a few minutes for the numbers to rise. Okay, so it looks like the numbers are starting to stabilize a little bit. So good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on when you're joining us from. If you haven't already seen me in some of the previous sessions, I'm Sophia Jeffries from the MBA Recruitment and Admissions team here at the Business School. Joined with me today are our MBA Co-Curriculum and Student Engagement Manager, Amy Major, as well as the MBA Senior Program Manager, Lucy Street, from our programs team, and they'll guide us through this webinar on co-curriculars. Please add any questions that you may have into our Q&A function along the way. We'll aim to answer those during the session, but also we'll dedicate a bit of time at the end for you. And if you could please use the Q&A function specifically rather than the chat, that would be perfect as well. So without further ado, I'll just hand over to Amy to start the session now.
Thank you, Sophia. I think the numbers are still going up a little bit, so I'll make a slow start. Could you just move us to the next slide? That would be great. Thank you. So just to echo Sophia's message then, really good to see so many of you on here today. To those of you joining us live and to those of you who may listen into the session afterwards, hope you find this interesting and informative, and hopefully you take away some information that you really sort of had some questions on, and I'm sure, you know, co-curriculum is a wide, expansive space, so we'll certainly not be able to cover everything in the hour we've got today, but I'm more than happy to share our contact details, and of course, more than anything, hope to see you on campus come September, so which is rolling around quite fast. So I think for us, Friday is actually our sort of working from home day, and for me and Lucy, I think what is the biggest thing that has been the real change this year is the interaction directly sort of face to face with the cohort in what is our very student facing roles. So I feel like I'm going back to the Zoom world today, presenting to you virtually. It would be lovely to see your faces. But hopefully we can still have a really interactive Q&A. Please do, as we say, pop those questions in as we're going through, and we'll just for sort of cohesiveness, we'll come to those at the end. So just to shortly introduce myself, so my role is co-curriculum and student engagement manager, fairly long title there. Effectively, what that means is I'm really the other side to the programs team, to Rachel Keeney, who you would have maybe heard from this morning if you were in the Year at a Glance session. So our function within programs is to really guide and support you on the things that aren't your degree, so aren't those things that you have to do for your degree. Everything from our MBA Student Council to our student groups. Other things that we're working on in this function that we won't speak about today specifically is Lucy is closely working with the 1+1, so we're leading that programming, and Lucy can give a bit more of a flavour of that. We're also just working really closely with many of the co-curricular centres, as we might call them, so some of our colleagues that you'll have met over the last few days, so the careers team, the entrepreneurship centre, the finance lab, our colleagues in the Skoll Centre, and others as well on other initiatives. So really a lot of work we're doing is around the cohesion of those activities, you know, from everything from sort of scheduling to content, and really sort of looking at how that marries with the core curriculum, which is a big project that we're undertaking at the moment, which Matthew Conisby, our MBA director, you might have heard him mention when you heard from him, I think on Wednesday. And that is a project at the moment called Pathways, where we're really looking to give students a greater clarity on how they might navigate their year in terms of how you might consider the core of your degree, alongside all of the co-curricular opportunities. And really, so you can sort of look to maybe map out or get a sense of what different options you will pick up at different times through almost, we wouldn't want to be so crude to say that you would be following a specific track, but perhaps you might want to be picking things from different areas of the overall experience to really sort of craft the program as you move throughout the year. So we'll certainly have more information coming during your onboarding period as to really sort of like display the program to you in really the form of pathways. So there'll be some more information coming on that down the track during the summer. So just really wanted to sort of allude to that. I actually have been with the school 5.5 years, and up until last September, I was within recruitment and admissions. So hello to anybody that I might have interacted with in those last months before I headed over to the programs team. So yes, this is a new phase within programs, is that we've sort of all effectively decoupled academics from co-curriculum in terms of how we think about those in terms of your student experience, albeit obviously I work incredibly closely with Rachel and her team because those things tightly are interlinked. And in my team is Lucy, who will introduce herself, and then also our colleague Alicia, who isn't on the presentation here today, but Alicia is our events manager. So I'll come to events a bit further on into my presentation, but is somebody that you would obviously interact with through co-curriculum events. With that, I'll hand over to you, Lucy, and perhaps you could just introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi there. My name is Lucy Street. I'm the student experience lead. So I help support the co-curricular activities in lots of different ways to help make sure that they run smoothly and they help enhance your MBA experience. This could be anything from organising activities, so I might help with promotion, could be social media to the wider school or the wider business community. We also can help approve funding for these activities, so that could be for conferences and competitions or for actual events that students want to run, or activities that we might want to run as an MBA programme. Co-curricular for you. We also help facilitate different forums, so you can give feedback on your experience and we can act on that. And Amy also mentioned I work with the 1+1 students, so help them to integrate into their MBA year and work with them during the year while they're in their masters, and help them access the business school.
Thanks, Lucy. Could you move to the next slide, if it's okay? Thank you. Great. So yeah, really sort of getting started, wants to give you a bit of information about our student council. So the MBA Student Council is a committee made up of all the roles that you see on the left-hand side there. And this group, we work really closely with them. So there's often not a day goes by where I'm not, or Lucy or Matthew Conisby, the MBA director, isn't in touch with one of the officers of the Student Council. So we meet with the Student Council for a formal meeting, I would say probably like bi-weekly. And then we may meet with like separate officers on different initiatives that we might be working on. At different points, we see these guys around the building all the time. We interact just, on email to resolve things, to take things forward. So we're really sort of working really closely with the MBA Student Council throughout the academic year. And, in many ways, we have myself and Lucy and Matthew, we work as closely with the Student Council as we do some of our programmes colleagues. So really just wanted to sort of mention the council to you and the function of this at this point of your onboarding process, because that might be something that you could be thinking about. This is the structure of the Student Council as it stands this year. A couple of those roles, there are co-officers for them, and the ones that you see have with a star, they have budgetary responsibility. So that means that they look after a pool of funds that is obviously from the school, and they're obviously responsible for making sure that is used innovatively, is used sensibly, and they obviously therefore then work really closely with us in terms of what that's going to be spent on and what that sort of looks like. So I won't run through all of those roles individually, but I'll perhaps give you a sense of a couple of them that might be less obvious. So perhaps sort of touching on the partnerships officer. So I think this is a great role. It's one that works with other programs, so cross programs. So as you'll probably know, we have other accredited degrees in the business school. So the partnerships officer would probably work mostly closely with the executive MBA. So that's where a lot of collaboration goes on, and there's mentoring programs that take place between the executive MBA, our accredited senior leadership diploma programs and MBAs. Section representatives, I'm sure many of you have heard about sections. So these are people that represent the sections when you're in your sections, teaching sections during the year. So I would say these are great, I guess the sections are great arenas for, camaraderie, and they really sort of like report back then to the co-presidents through to the student council with initiatives, ideas, things that they think need changing, all of those kind of things as well. SBS Oxford Union Liaison obviously is something that is unique to Oxford and probably other business school, a few other business schools as well. So it's really great to have somebody on the council that also can have a sway and influence within the Oxford Union in terms of maybe speakers that we might be able to bring to the union. I think probably a lot of the others are fairly obvious in terms of their function. I would say if you're maybe considering the co-president role, that that does carry quite a bit of responsibility. Though those two people. So this year, Mary, who's in the centre middle there at the front in the gold skirt, is one of our co-presidents, and Mission on the front left there with the sort of dark pink tie. They really sort of take lots of different areas and sort of work with all the various officers, and they do a really good job of sort of effectively dividing and conquering in terms of like how they work really closely with myself and Lucy and Matthew Conisby as the MBA director, and they're really present, really involved. So I would never say that anybody takes up a role within a group or a council or an OBN and then doesn't fulfill it. But what I would sort of stress in this kind of fora, if you're considering these kind of opportunities, is these are things that you do need to be able to fulfill throughout the whole academic year. And we've certainly seen that this year. People have come forth and are really contributing, are really present, and are really involved. So we'll touch on some of the other opportunities to be co-chairs of OBNs and things as well. And I would just always advise you to not overburden yourself. The MBA is going to be a hugely intense, busy year. So I think if you look at the student council, none of these people are also a co-chair of an OBN. I think that's quite a crucial thing to mention. Taking up too many leadership positions could be something that you might want to avoid. So I think that's, I'll talk a little bit more about the process for the student council when we get to the end, because I'm going to talk about the process for the OBNs and clubs and groups as well. But yeah, would really consider you to, urge you to think about the student council roles. We'll definitely give you the opportunity during the onboarding process to obviously learn more about the specific job roles, for you to get some direct contact with these individuals if you're specifically interested in being part of the council, and much more if you're an interested party. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour. So next slide, please, Sophia. So this is our current structure of our student groups. I say current groups because this can change obviously year on year. So obviously I could talk for a long time about all of these, so I'm not going to go into detail about each group individually. But effectively, so the alliances were set up around 4 years ago, really sort of to speak to two key goals of the business school at the time, and I think still very much the case. So many of you will know about the focus on Africa within the school, and clearly every business school globally is really striving towards gender equity and gender parity. However, I think a lot of the work of the Alliance has definitely become quite D&I focused as a whole, and this team definitely worked really closely with the diversity and inclusion officer as well on the student council. I should say that group also works really closely with the Pride group, which is Pride at SBS as well. So yeah, the two alliances really sort of do speak to overarching goals of the school, and are doing some fantastic work. I know you're going to hear from the alliances in the next session, so I'm not going to steal their thunder, but yeah, would really urge you to consider getting involved in either of those groups if you're interested in the development and opportunities of the African continent, and if you are a woman or not a woman, however you designate, the Alliance is really sort of open to all. They're doing some fantastic work around men and women working together, and how everyone can be an ally in the classroom and in the workplace. So, but as I said, they're going to be up next, so I don't want to touch too much on that. Moving on to the OBNs. So the OBNs, these are the OBNs that we have for this year. As you'll see, sort of they speak to sort of key sector groups. They work quite closely with our careers function as well. And I mean, these groups have been really keeping Lucy and I busy, particularly this Hillary term. As many of you may know, we had the sort of Omicron COVID period, which did inhibit some activity around the sort of end of the Michaelmas term, and just as we sort of came immediately out of sort of the Christmas holidays break. So that really saw all of these groups come back with a real resurgence of activity. Just to give you a quick sort of sense of what these groups are up to at the moment, I had a look at sort of what had been going on last week and then this next week. Considering next week is also assessment week, and so the guys are all still really busy. So the Finance OBN are hosting a VC Trends and Startup Analysis session with an organisation called Oxford Capital, where they've got the partners coming in. The Tech Group have got an alumni networking with Tech Alumni, which is a partnership between Said and London Business School. We had a male allies training session just earlier this week, which was really the last event as part of all of the International Women's Day events. Last week, the Media and Entertainment Club hosted almost like a sort of half-day summit. They had a couple of speakers from major football clubs in the UK. They also had speakers from Sky, Spotify, Twitter. Really good session on how to get a job in media. We also had a mixer with the Social Impact OBN. So yeah, that's just a sense of like things that have gone on literally in the last, well, going on next week and in the last sort of 5 working days. So yeah, I would say these groups do a fantastic job of bringing speakers, of working with careers, offering safe spaces, offering a whole manner of opportunities. And it's really sort of, down to you guys in terms of what you want to create. Lucy will go on to sort of explain a little bit more about the supports that we provide on a really sort of like daily basis to these groups. But what I would say is that coming out of the pandemic, it's obviously been an interesting couple of years for not only just doing an MBA in general in a what has been a virtual hybrid, in-person back to hybrid setting, but that's definitely affected student groups on campus. And so we've seen a great resurgence this year, I would say, and I think what that means for you guys coming in September is that there's going to be a really good ability for teams to have created a blueprint and hand that over to the next cohort. It was hard yards for student groups during what was the pandemic, because they were really sort of, in the main completely operating virtually. So it's just been fabulous to see what people have been able to achieve being, back in person. So moving on to the third column here. So we have obviously this group of ABNs, and then we have this group of clubs. Now the clubs self-form throughout the year, really during Michaelmas, and they aren't elected, so they are self-elected. Now that could be a good system, or it might be not so good a system. We have not reviewed our student group structure for a few cycles now. Obviously, as I mentioned, the last 2 years have been pandemic, so it's been really sort of like carrying on and just doing what they could do. But we're taking the opportunity as we move into the early Trinity term to really sort of review the structure, review how the groups overall work, whether the structure is correct. Should all groups be elected by their fellow classmates or not? Does this structure work? Does it not? Do our careers team think it works? Do our current students think it works? So we're going to really sort of like, we're letting you in on what we're doing here. We're going to really, myself and Lucy, perform a full review of the structure that we have and see if we can, make some enhancements for the next academic year. Really in the flavour of just constantly looking to innovate and see how we can do things better. And something we have done here, you'll see sort of a couple of groups down here in italics, is that last year the India OBN was formed. It's the first time we had a sort of, I guess, country or regional group coming forward as a club group, OBN, whatever. And that really sort of definitely has paved the way for other groups of students saying, well, we would like to have a voice, we'd like to have, we think there's opportunity within our continent or region to really sort of forge more networks, with alumni or for careers, for networking, all of the kind of things that I'm sure you're imagining. And so we this year set up two groups, the LATAM Business Regional Group and the Asia Business Regional Group. And so that is definitely something, as we go through our review in Trinity, is we'll be looking to see how this best sits. Are we best to have an India OBN, or would that be like a wider Asia group longer term? Are there other regions of the world that would want to be involved or not? How might that best sit? So yeah, this is the structure that we have this year. These are the clubs that came forward, and how that might look come September could be slightly different. We're really going to sort of like, obviously, as I say, review that and see what works best for the future. But yeah, a couple of these regional groups, there's some really exciting opportunities coming up. So we have our LATAM students working with some students from the Blavatnik School, and they are going to be hosting a LATAM forum in June. And our India OBN are repeating their India Business Conclave that they hosted last year. And our incoming Dean, Sumitra Dutta, has just showed his interest in being involved in that as he joins us right at the beginning of June. So we're not sure whether he's going to be there in person. It's in the first week of him starting and has some travel commitments, but he's already shown an interest in making some speaker connections, which is just fabulous to see from just like one email that got sent actually just yesterday. So yeah, so there is so much going on in this space. I cannot tell you. We could, as I say, spend all day speaking about these groups, but myself and Lisa, I know, would welcome contact with any of you at any time. As part of the onboarding on the MBA portal as of June, you'll be able to get details of all of the current co-chairs and all of that kind of great information. And I'm sure we'll probably host further sessions down the track before you come in September as well. So Lucy, did you want to talk a little bit about the support that we sort of give to these groups. I say we because you are really you're really the backbone behind this on a daily basis, supporting everybody. So
yeah, I think I'd like to just echo Amy's point about you know, it's really what you put into it that make these groups and the activities they do come together and flourish. And I think we've just had so much input from the students, and they've, you know, had so much energy to do things this year. And I'm here to support these activities that the clubs and OBNs to take part in and organise. And this could be anything, as I think I spoke before about, from promotion, so helping with social media, encouraging you to do Instagram takeovers, put together blogs, get things highlighted on LinkedIn, just advertise it to the advertise events and to the cohort. I'm also here to help organise the events, so it would be kind of like room bookings, AV, anything you really need. Talk to catering if you're providing food for these sorts of events, and also trying to get school engagement. So it could be inviting faculty or key members of staff, helping you with logistics. Does it work well with what else is going on in the MBA and the programme, when to hold the events, and also there's some funding available. So yeah, lots of different things that we can help with organising, not just events, but anything that you want to put together in relation to these sorts of groups. And I think also one of the key things is just to talk about the fact that we can help you liaise with alumni, so that would help you you know, access key speakers and to attend the sorts of events that you might want to put on.
Fabulous, thanks Lucy. Shall we move to the next slide? Great,
Yeah,
so we
oh, sorry,
on, Lucy, you go. No, you go, you take it.
Okay, something else that I'm quite keen in helping students access is there's some funding for students to attend competitions and conferences. So there's an application process. This can be done throughout the year, and what we do is we ask you to apply, and then we'll review and see if we can help you with some funding. In regards to competitions, two of the main competitions which happen every year that students tend to take part in is, one is the Global VCIC, and that's a venture capital competition, and also MINT, which is an impact investment competition. There are also various case competitions that students tend to take part in from prestigious universities, banks and companies. These are different year on year, so I didn't give examples because students tend to find that things that are linking with what they're doing on the programme and are particularly important for them or their business interest. We also have some competitions which are organised by SDS, and these are usually for the finance lab students. If we could turn to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to talk about some of the achievements that we've had this year. So we've had some SBS winning teams. We've also had some individual student winners, and we've also had some finalists. Some are still waiting to attend the finals, so we should have some more achievements potentially coming through. And once we hear of any achievements and you've had some funding, we also help you to promote these on social media. So again, you can do an Instagram takeover, a blog, we can get this promoted on LinkedIn. But yeah, we're really here to kind of support you to attend these competitions, but it is up to you to kind of, you know, approach us and ask us what sort of ones you're interested in. but we will be giving you more information about the types of ones that you can be entering. In addition to the competitions, if we could move to the next slide, please. We also have funding for conferences, and you can apply throughout your MBA year for this. And these are really to complement your studies or your business interests. And these are different as you get different types of MBA students. You know, all the different conferences that I've applied for tend to vary year to year. Just some examples has been VivaTech, the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, Slush, ProductCon, and the World Economic Forum. So really, again, the same as with the clubs. It's really what you put in, what you approach us with, and we'll review and see if we're really keen to support people to do these kind of co-curricular things, and there is funding available.
I think just to add to Lucy's points, can we just go back to that last slide? Thank you, Sophia, sorry. Yeah, I think really just to stress there, there's clearly not unlimited funds for these things, as in we can't be paying for sort of several round the world trips to conferences or competitions, but the support is really quite extensive. Certainly, having myself moved from recruitment admissions to now being in the programs side and seeing these opportunities really sort of firsthand what the students get involved in, the funding really does go quite some way to support you attending international opportunities. Obviously that is now coming back for many of us, if we can say post-pandemic or sort of low pandemic phase that we're in. So I'd really urge you to as you're coming into your MBA year to be aware of these opportunities, and to really choose them wisely as well. So if we were to give you sort of tips and tricks, then you'd certainly want to use you can apply for funding for say one conference. You would want to use that for something probably international with like a higher ticket value than something that might be happening in London that was just the train ticket and maybe a £25 ticket. So it's a really good opportunity for you to really think about it carefully and think about what opportunities you might want to be involved in. So yeah, we'd be happy to take any questions obviously on those, and Lucy and myself obviously are keeping a really good record of all the wins this year and everything that anybody's taken part in, so that we then have a really good almost like log and registry of anything that anybody might want to do next year that we can just very easily repeat. But of course we're open to your requests as well. I think we had a request the other day for somebody who was attending a sort of really interesting agri-tech conference, didn't we, Lucy? That was sort of the first time we'd heard of that particular conference. So yeah, we're all ears. So with that, yeah, the next slide please, Sophia. So yeah, really, as you sort of see here on the left, I've listed a few different things that we might term into events, but clearly some of these are a little bit more to them, just to give you a bit of a sense of sort of framing the year from a sort of co-curricular point of view in terms of your access maybe to the wider university and other opportunities that are going to be there for you. So I'm sure Rachel will have touched on launch earlier today. So we're currently in the really sort of like early stages of starting to plan your launch, which I think is the 19th, is it the 19th or 20th of September, whichever that Monday is. I think it's the 19th. And that will include lots of co-curricular opportunities. So that will involve speakers, that will involve panels, and that will involve some events in the wider university as well. Lots of careers will feature in there as well. And so, yeah, lots of opportunities to really sort of like come together in bigger and smaller settings in what is quite a sort of like co-curricular nature. Talking of the wider university, we had a new initiative this year called Oxford Insights. So we'd had feedback from you know, prior year students. Some people find it really easy to sort of like access things in the wider university. Maybe that's down to how much they want to be involved with their college or not. But quite often you spend the year within what is this, you know, amazing city here. You can see the Sheldonian Theatre in this picture, and you sort of like wander through it in awe of all of these buildings around you, and the fact that every time you turn a corner, there's another, you know, really interesting centre of the university or building or faculty area, and sometimes you don't have an understanding of sort of like how that's really sort of like shaped the university, and you know, why is this business school now part of what is this, you know, 800 year plus old institution. So along with Pegram Harrison, who is a faculty within the humanities, we formed a sort of co-curricular programme of, you might say, events or activity to give you some access to the wider university. So this year we have hosted sessions with the most eminent professor of architecture at Oxford, called William White, and we hosted sessions within the Sheldonian here and within the Divinity School to really kind of give students a sense of how the buildings of Oxford have informed leadership at the university and have really sort of like shaped the structure within which we learn and exist today within the university. So really fascinating. And we had really amazing uptake from the current MBAs to engage in that kind of activity. And then we took it one step further. So I'm sure some of you may have been involved in the virtual walking tour today, but we had live walking tours with historians of Oxford that are within William White's faculty area, to really kind of, take that activity outside of the Sheldonian, outside of the Divinity School, to give even more insight. And now this term we are taking students to the Oxford Philharmonic. In fact, they don't even know about this yet because we're going to announce it on Monday. So there's going to be opportunity to attend rehearsals of the Oxford Philharmonic in the Sheldonian, and possibly, if we can get the tickets to some of those shows, which are amazing opportunities. Obviously, they may not be for everybody, but if that's something that might interest you, then we certainly hope to repeat that next year. We're looking at other ways in which we can take that programming forward with Professor Pegram Harrison into your year, and we're already planning an exciting session as part of launch. Moving on, you obviously matriculate within this great building of the Sheldonian Theatre, and I'm happy to check back when Lucy's speaking, maybe in a minute on something. I'll check back. I think the date of matriculation, which is your ceremony to officially become part of the university, is the 8th of October. I'll check on my calendar in a minute. So moving on, you obviously get the opportunity to hear from lots of amazing speakers at the business school itself. In fact, in the first picture we saw of the student council, they were visiting the House of Lords and were invited by Lord Karen Villamoria, who is the founder of Cobra Beer and chief of CEO of the CBI in the UK. So he actually came in launch, and then the student council got invited to go and visit the House of Lords just a couple of months ago. I'm sure many of you, maybe Formula One fans, will have seen the announcement of Toto Wolff, the principal of Mercedes Formula One, as an associate fellow at the business school, and he will be hosting an MBA specific event during the Trinity term. So just a couple of examples of speakers that we have had. I'm sure many of you will have heard of Paul Polman, who is the chair of the board of the business school. He is definitely someone not to be missed in a speaker forum. If you have any interest in sort of ESG and big business making an impact on the world, then I definitely encourage you to Google Paul Polman and Surrey Business School, and you're in for a real kind of treat in terms of his presence as a speaker. And the MBA year, without COVID lockdowns and pandemic, would not be complete without the sporting MBATs. So it's really fabulous to see these coming back again this year. So we're looking at around 200 plus of our current MBAs heading to Paris in May at the HEC Paris campus, along with many other European business schools. And yeah, no pressure. I think we've won it a couple of times in the last few years. So yes, this cohort is looking to bring the trophy back to Oxford again. So we'll see what they can do on the 7th and 8th of May in Paris. Moving on to sort of, recognising community. I mean, just to give you a sense of the cohesion of our cohort and how they really like to celebrate each other and traditions. And these are other events with which myself and Lucy have assisted. So we've had celebrations for Diwali, we've had celebrations for the Lunar New Year. We have a dinner coming up to celebrate Eid at the beginning of May. We had LGBTQ+ History Month in February, so some great stuff going on there. And I know the group are planning some really good programming for Pride Month in June. Obviously International Women's Day, Thanksgiving, and that is just to name a few of the kind of things that go on. But yeah, that's where we really see some great collaboration go on between the, I guess, sort of like staff of the business school and the students, in terms of sort of the community really coming together. So I'm sure you might have seen some of those on social media if you follow Oxford SBS or the hashtag Oxford MBA. Nearly getting through these, but hopefully this is sort of whetting your taste buds of the kind of things that you might be able to get involved in. You obviously have a membership to the Oxford Union, which is something not to be missed. I would say if there's one thing you're going to commit to on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to do within the wider university, then attending some of the events at the Oxford Union is definitely a massive opportunity. And typically we obviously have a student council representative on the Oxford Union liaison team, and then we will always host a couple of debates throughout the year. So we'll always typically have a debate during launch, where if you're wanting to try a bit of debating or you already have some good skills in debating, then you can look to get involved. And we finally always have a debate during capstone, which brings me to capstone, which is your final celebration week of your degree, which takes place usually in the sort of second week of September. And so that's where we have really sort of the opportunity to finalise the year with you over the course of 3 or 4 days. Lots of co-curricular activities, social events, dinners, debates, your end of course ceremony, which is what you see in this picture here. This is sometimes really colloquially called your fake ceremony. It's your end of course ceremony with the business school, but it is not your official degree ceremony, which happens with your college. And typically that takes place in the March or May or sometimes November following the end of your degree. So you do have the opportunity, because we love getting dressed up at Oxford, to attend 2 ceremonies. So I know that's often a question we get from people, so I just thought I would make that clear. So I think with that we'll move to the next slide, and then we'll have some time for questions. So I know I'm conscious you're coming to the end of sort of 3 days of lots of information, but come June, everything is going to be available on what is called the MBA portal. So if you are a deposit paid incoming candidate, you will get access to the MBA portal, and this is where lots of the information that we've discussed today will appear in lots more detail. So pertaining specifically to some of the things that we've talked about today, the alliances will open in July in terms of your ability to sign up, well, to apply to be a committee member or to be a member of one of those groups, and that will stay open until early launch. The Student Council and the OBNs and groups will stay open into the launch period, and they stay open a little bit longer. Particularly that's important with the OBNs because you form a group of co-chairs. So you would look to form a group of, say, 3 co-chairs with your fellow incoming classmates. So we want you to give you chance to be able to sort of find the people that you might want to go forward with, and then that results in a pitching process in usually the second week of term, so it's after launch. So it gives you, it's usually sort of 3 weeks in if you include launch. So there's a little bit of time, running space for you to meet some people and put yourselves forward. And as you can just see from that image below, that's where you're also going to find lots of information on everything from, you know, IT support to all of the different centres that you've met throughout the course of this week, to how to use the library, to you know, how to fill up your cashless cards, to, you know, buy food in the canteen, all, you know, all manner of different bits of information. So yeah, do look out for that, the MBA portal, which will be launching in June. So I think with that, we'll probably move to the Q&A, if that's okay. Should we just move back to one of the first, maybe let's go back to the Student Council pictures, Ophia, so we have, or you can take us off slideshow if you prefer, whichever works best. So, so let's have a look through, I'll just take a couple of these. So there's a question here around what is the difference between an OBN and a club. So this is a really good question, because this is probably one of the areas through which Lucy and I have really sort of sought to think, right, we should review how this works, is because the OBNs, the big distinction is that the OBNs are elected by your fellow classmates through the pitch sessions, whereas the clubs are self-elected. And we actually, obviously, we aren't, through the survey and review that we're going to do, we obviously aren't going to try and, you know, inform the outcome, but this is probably one area where we would hope that people would vote for some change, in that we do think there should be some parity in terms of how people are elected or come forward, so that everybody is elected, so that there's fairness across the board. It to us doesn't quite seem fair that people can just sort of self-elect to be a chair of a club, and that's just something that's been historic over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, and something that we think maybe could change. And there does seem to be some appetite in the cohort that could be different. Sticking on a couple of OBN questions, why is there an India OBN but not one for other individual countries? So the India OBN was created last year out of lots of discussions between alumni and the school around the importance of India, and the India Business Conclave was formed, which then created the India OBN. As we mentioned, this has then given rise to obviously sort of students across sort of the whole of Asia coming forward and being like, well, we think there needs to be sort of a wider Asia group. So I think as part of that review, you may have heard me mention, perhaps, you know, we do move to more of sort of like regional groups as opposed to a country. And we need to look at what opportunity there is across the board for other regions that may be interested in having such a group, and obviously what the purpose of all of those groups may be. So it's definitely not, yeah, I think it was Rohit, to your point, it's not because there couldn't be any other group, but obviously, you know, we could have endless clubs and OBNs. We haven't said no to anybody else, but it's just that came forward last year and we, you know, took the opportunity to create it. So Lucy, would you like to take a couple of these?
Yeah, so there was one about the family business circle. Do they have a page that we can check out? So we have put them on our website, but we haven't got a specific page for them. What I will do is link in with that group and ask them how they're advertising it, and whether there's access externally for you to look in. Another thing that we are looking at is potentially, like with the ABNs, with the clubs, of potentially looking at like a handover with the clubs to the next year. So it would be really good with the clubs that have been made this year, if anyone's interested in kind of that area, that we can pass on that knowledge and pass on the information and pass on the networking that that particular club did that year. So that is something that we're working on. And another question, is there an LGBTQ alliance within SBS? So we do have the Pride group. So that is another group that is organised, it is run by the students. They link in with different aspects throughout the school. I think, Amy, you know a bit more about the Romba conference that they go to, don't you? Is that right?
Yeah, so maybe, I'm sure if you're part of the LGBT community, I'm sure you may have heard of the Romba Scholarship, which is reaching out MBA. So they definitely get involved in that conference opportunity. In fact, two of our two students actually attended that in person this academic year. And yeah, they definitely, when it comes to, so you put yourself a little bit on the spot with this question, Lucy, because you weren't in the team last summer, but the group last year, they got involved with the wider Oxford Pride activities. So the university and Oxford as a city as a whole, I would say, has a really great Pride community. So yeah, absolutely, that Pride group is involved in that. So there's a question here about time commitment to the alliances. I will leave that probably because the alliance webinar is coming up next. But yes, the alliances, the difference between probably the OBNs and the alliances in terms of being elected is the OBNs, you are elected by your fellow classmates. For the alliances, they are, your application is reviewed by senior leadership of the school that are involved in those initiatives. So there's just a difference there for you. Question here on competitions. So would the list be circulated? Can students participate in other competitions as well that they would fit? So yeah, absolutely. I think what we will probably, this is another space where obviously competitions and conferences just weren't so active during the sort of past 2 academic years during the pandemic, and there's just been so much activity this year. I think what Lucy and I could definitely do is look to provide that sort of log and list of those within the MBA portal, which would be a good starting point for people. But of course, if you find others and they're related to your course and there's a justifiable reason, then there's no reason why you couldn't get involved in others. A couple of people here asking about treks. Yeah, so there are treks. There's definitely treks happening this April during the Easter break. I think there's a couple of treks to Africa. The international elective to Africa was delayed until the summer, so I think some activity will happen then. And there are some students engaging in an Israel trek as well. I would say obviously with Omicron having been quite sort of peak during the winter, that probably has still slightly affected the ability to sort of really forward plan big trek activity for this year. But yeah, definitely, I don't think providing everything continues as we'd hope. I think that could be fully back next year, but I would say probably the trek activity has just been slightly reduced. It's sort of the first time that all business schools have been sort of sending students out places, so yeah, it's still been a little bit sensitive, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. So just to clarify a little bit, obviously more the process in terms of becoming the head of an OBN. So what would happen is you'll see these you'll see the OBNs that are available to become a co-chair of during your onboarding period and during launch, and you could then go away and find other potential fellow co-chairs, and you would come forward as a group of, so currently we have 3 or 4 co-chairs for all of our OBNs. I think we'll probably, as part of our review, look at that and see, should it be 3, should it be 4, could it be 3 or 4? And then what you'll do is you will come to a pitch, you'll nominate yourselves and you'll come to a pitch session where you'll potentially go against other co-chair groups. I think that happened on like the 7th of October this last year. So it's usually in sort of like week 1 of your teaching. We let you get launch out of the way before you have to do that. And then there'll be several days where your fellow classmates will vote. And then at the end of that vote, we will then find out who the successful co-chairs are. So we actually had a dead heat this last year on our consulting group. So we had to then go out and do another vote again. So yeah, that's how it's done. It's really transparent system, which does work well. The difference has just been is that we've never had voting for clubs, only for the OBNs. So potentially that could be something that we change. So question from somebody who's paid their deposit, could they get involved with OBN events? Yeah, absolutely. I think we certainly could look at a way to make sure that the admissions team could make you aware of different OBN events that are happening and publicise these to you. The Male Allies one, I know you mentioned, that took place last week. That was an unrecorded live session, just because it was very much about people coming together in what was like a really sort of like safe space. And I'm not saying that, you know, it wouldn't be a safe space if it were recorded, but the idea was for that to be a very much in-person session where people could be really candid and share their experiences. So it was very much like a live conversation. So that might be the only kind of event where it might be more for just the current cohort. But yeah, absolutely. I know that OBNs are keen to have, you know, big audiences at their events. So I'm sure we can make that possible. So in terms of them, talking of them being advertised, so yeah, once you're a member of an OBN, you hear about them via their newsletters. The events that were happening over the last week and next week, we always feature those within our MBA communications as well. And yeah, you definitely hear about everything that's going on. Obviously, I would say there is a lot going on within the business school, and there's a lot going on within the wider university. So, you know, keeping track of everything and being able to attend everything can be quite tricky. You will find that you often, you know, could quite easily be double booked and have lots on offer. So. Let's have a look here. Do you want to take that sports question, Lucy?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm actually not quite sure about this one. I don't know what the difference is, but I do know that there are lots of sports clubs. Sorry, Amy.
No, I'm not sure. I think I'll put my email address in the chat, and I'm not sure if I know exactly how to answer this one either. I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and please do email us and we'll just look into it. Oh, Sophia's deleted that there. I'll get a screen grab of that one from you, Sophia, at the end, perhaps. And finally, last question, will we be matriculating with the wider university? Yes, so your matriculation is a ceremony that happens within the wider university within your college. So you matriculate with the wider university as a student of the University of Oxford. So, and then I think we've got time for one last question here. What is the difference between the consulting OBN and the consulting development programme? So the consulting OBN would be the student group, so the student leadership group for consulting, and then the consulting development programme is run through the careers department. But obviously the chairs of the consulting OBN would closely link in with our consulting colleagues in the careers team. So hopefully that is clear. So I think with that, we're just coming up to time. Really like to thank you for listening in. Also to congratulate you again on your offers to join us. If you're already secured your deposit, then really can't wait to meet you in September. As much as Lucy and I still feel like we're only halfway through the year with this cohort, so you know, we will hold on to them for a few months longer, but we will be working with you obviously a lot more closely as of June when the MBA portal opens, where there'll be lots more information coming, and I'm sure we'll have more sessions like this where we can give you, more information in detail of specific spaces that we have, obviously given you quite high level information of today. But if anybody has any questions at any time, I'm more than happy to, connect with me on LinkedIn, drop us a line. We're more than happy to help you on your decision making journey. Wish you congratulations, and I know you're now coming to the end of 3 long days of experience events, so wish you all a great weekend when it arrives for you. And with that, we'll hand back to Sophia.
Yeah, no, that's perfect, and thank you very much. So thanks everyone for sending through all those questions and for joining the session. I really hope you enjoyed it, and a huge thank you to Amy and Lucy for leading the session today, giving up their time, and that's really great, and hopefully has given you a bit more of an insight into the co-curriculars and what to expect. So also just to mention, I've popped in the recruitment and admissions email address into the chat, so you can contact us as well as Amy and Lucy in addition with any questions after the event that we can help you with. And we hope to see you at some more of our sessions today. We have 2 left. So we have the Alliances webinar at 3 p.m. With our current student panel, followed by at 4:30 p.m. our closing session with an introduction from our MBA Associate Director, Liam Kilby. And this will then be followed by some networking opportunities for you to meet your future classmates, get to know each other a bit more. Just to mention as well, the session has been recorded, so you will receive a recording of this following the event. And thank you again, everybody, for your time, your questions, and have a lovely weekend as well. Perfect.
Thanks all.
Thank you.